Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. This week's Torah portion is Noach. And in it, God says, I see that the world is filled with Hamas, with violence, with evil, with wickedness, with destruction, with robbery, with theft. And therefore, I'm going to bring a flood and destroy the world. And I remember 2 years ago, right after October 7th, when we read this Torah portion, we said, isn't it fascinating that the word for evil and wickedness and violence is Hamas? But the beautiful thing is that a year later, when Noach emerged from the ark, it was no longer Hamas in the world. And here it took us 2 years, and we're still not finished. But the evil, the Hamas, is being ridden from the world. But the question is, why did God decide to destroy the world when there was Hamas? Why didn't he maybe show compassion to try to forgive them? And the rabbis share a parable. They say there was once this bird that would swoop down, as birds do, and catch a fish with its mouth and eat it. And one day the bird swooped down on the ocean and grabbed the fish, and he was about to eat it, and then the fish turned to the bird and said, please have compassion, mercy on me, don't eat me, I want to live. So the bird said, fine, and spit out the fish. But then he saw that the fish finished chewing what he was eating. And the fish spat out the leftovers of the little fish that he was eating for lunch. And the bird said, 1 minute, you asked me to have compassion on you, but you have no compassion for other creatures? And the bird went back and ate the fish. And so too, God says, if you want compassion, you have to show compassion. When I see you are filled with Hamas and you have no compassion for others, why should I have compassion and mercy upon you? And it's fascinating that, the world is crying compassion for the people in Gaza, they're starving. But where was their compassion for little children and elderly men and women on October 7th? To call for compassion when you yourself are cruel is so hypocritical. And that's what God said with the people of the flood. I saw a story in Israel. There were these two families, lived one above the other in an apartment building. And the family on top had a lot of children. They were all getting engaged and having grandchildren. The family was growing. And the family below, unfortunately, also a religious family, their kids weren't getting engaged. Things weren't moving. And one day the neighbor from above comes down to this neighbor below and says, listen, you see, thank God my kids are getting married. I have a lot of grandchildren. They come to visit for Shabbat. I need more room. I want to expand my apartment. I want to build out an extension. But I know that if I build out, some of your views from your back windows will be obstructed. I was wondering if that would be okay, if I could get your permission to do that. The fellow said, let me talk to my wife. And he went to close the door. He went to talk to his wife. And he said, I can't believe this guy has no sensitivity whatsoever. He's having kids getting engaged, married, grandchildren. He sees we have a house full of single children. No one's getting married. And he comes to me and says, I need more room because of this. And I should give him permission to block my views? Where's his sensitivity? And his wife said to her husband, you're right, but on the other hand, let's do the right thing. If we show compassion, we're kind, maybe God will repay us. And so he goes back upstairs to his neighbor, knocks on the door, he says, listen, I spoke to my wife, we're going to give you permission, you could build your extension. He said, thank you so much, that's wonderful, but there's one more thing I want to ask you. The contractor told me that since they have to extend the beams to extend the house, it would be easiest if they're able to come into your apartment and break through the ceiling to get to the beams, to replace them. It'll make the job a lot easier. Would that be okay if they do a little work through your apartment? Well, again, he was like, I can't believe he's asking me this, but he remembered what his wife said, and he said, you know what, sure, go ahead, that's fine. And sure enough, a week later, a crew of contractor workers show up. They show up, they start breaking his ceiling, there's debris all over the living room, they're doing their work, and he's watching this, what a mess his apartment's turned into. But he said, you know what, it's the right thing. Finished the job. A few months later, the tenant downstairs, his daughter gets engaged, and there's a big mazel tov, and everyone comes to say l'chaim. And when the families get together, they're talking, the father of the bride from the apartment and the new groom and the father, and he says, tell me, how did this come about? He says, I'll tell you. He says, your daughter's name came up and we looked into her and she's a wonderful girl, And I said, this is a great girl, but I didn't know much about your family. So I knew someone who lives in this building. I said, let me call him. He's a neighbor. Maybe he could tell me about your family. And when I called him, I said, do you know about this family? My son maybe is going to date his daughter. Thinking about this, and the neighbor said, oh, they're the most wonderful, beautiful, kind-hearted family. Magnificent. He says, why do you say that? He says, well, recently his neighbor wanted to build an extension, and not only did he give him permission to block his views, but he also allowed the contractors to work in his house for weeks to be able to do the job. They're just the kindest people. When I heard that, I said, wow, that's the type of family I want my son to marry into. When we show compassion and mercy and love to others, God repays us and bestows that upon us. Have a wonderful day.